3:47 a.m. Sharonville, Ohio. The corridor on the fourth floor of the extended stay hotel off Interstate 71 was empty. Fluorescent lights hummed at half power. The housekeeping cart from the previous evening still sat at the far end of the hall, parked against a linen closet no one had come back for. A thin smell of industrial cleaner hung in the recycled air. The carpet, a pattern of dark burgundy and gold that had once been meant to look upscale, showed the kind of wear that accumulates over years of rolling luggage and foot traffic, and nothing being fully cleaned the way it should be. Then the elevator doors opened. 6 tactical operators from the U.S. Marshals Southern Ohio Fugitive Apprehension Strike Team moved into the corridor in a single file. Behind them, 4 FBI special agents from the Cincinnati field office. Behind them, a federal emergency medical technician carrying a trauma bag and a secondary kit mounted in a chest rig. No one spoke. Hand signals only. Each operator wore body armor with a U.S. Marshals panel at the chest and carried a sidearm. 2 carried long guns held in low ready. Their footfalls were nearly silent on the worn carpet. The corridor camera above room 412 recorded all of it at 4 frames per second. Not enough resolution to see the expression on anyone's face, but enough to show the shape of the operation, the formation, the precise interval between each figure as they moved from the elevator bank toward the suite. The door to suite 412 had a laminated "Do Not Disturb" sign on the handle. It had been there for 11 consecutive days. At 3:47 and 22 seconds, the breach team hit both entry points simultaneously, the corridor door and an interior partition wall that had been framed and drywalled into the suite's connecting room sometime after check-in. The partition came down in under 4 seconds. Behind it were 4 women. The youngest was 23 years old. The oldest was 27. They had been missing from 3 different states for 146 days. This is the story of how a housekeeper's routine linen swap cracked a case that a joint federal task force had spent nearly 5 months trying to find. The thread that unraveled everything did not begin with a wiretap or a confidential informant. It began with a heat sensor indicator light glowing behind a wall that, according to the hotel's original blueprints, contained only insulation. Her name, for the purposes of this reconstruction, is Maria Delgado. She had worked housekeeping at the extended stay property for 3 years. She knew every room on her rotation the way a mechanic knows an engine, by its sounds, its rhythms, its small departures from normal. She knew which rooms ran their heat too high and which guests left the bathroom fan going all night. She knew the sound of a deadbolt thrown from the inside versus a door that had simply swung shut on its latch. She had spent 3 years building an involuntary archive of everything a hotel floor looked and sounded and felt like when it was operating as it should. Which was why she noticed, without being able to immediately explain what she was noticing, that Suite 412 had stopped feeling right. Suite 412 had been booked under a corporate account. The name on the ledger was registered to a limited liability company incorporated in Delaware, with a registered agent address in Wilmington that turned out to be a mailbox rental storefront. The booking had been prepaid in full for 60 days, extended twice by phone, each extension prepaid by a different prepaid card purchased at a retail location that surveillance footage would later confirm was never visited twice by the same person. Room service requests for Suite 412 had been declined politely, consistently, and without variation since the 2nd week of the booking. Whoever answered the in-room phone said the same thing each time. They were fine. They didn't need anything. Thank you. The voice was always the same, male, unhurried, with a flat affect that hotel staff later described as neither friendly nor unfriendly, just utterly neutral, the way a voice sounds when it has been rehearsed, until it contains no information worth analyzing. The "Do Not Disturb" sign had moved. Delgado was certain of that. She had a memory for such things. In the early weeks of the booking, the sign had been taken down every few days, replaced, repositioned. The kind of movement a legitimate long-term guest generates. laundry left outside, a food wrapper in the hallway trash. The minor evidence of human occupancy. But beginning on November 9th, the sign stopped moving entirely. 11 days. No laundry exchange. No trash. No answered phone. The only thing that changed was the faint amber glow of a sensor light visible at the base of the interior wall when Delgado pressed her pass card briefly against the doorframe on November 12th to listen. She had been making her rounds at 3:15 in the morning, covering a colleague's shift, and the corridor was empty and very quiet. She stood at that doorframe for perhaps 20 seconds, long enough to feel the stillness on the other side of the door as something different from ordinary sleep, long enough to notice the light. She had never seen an indicator light at floor level in any other room on her floor. She reported it to her floor supervisor before her shift ended. The floor supervisor reported it to the hotel duty manager later that morning. The duty manager, a man who had worked hospitality management for 17 years and understood the difference between a guest who wanted privacy and a situation that felt wrong, called the Hamilton County tip line at 9:41 a.m. on November 14, 2025. He did not describe what he thought was happening. He described only what had been observed: the duration of the Do Not Disturb sign, the declined service requests, the corporate booking structure, and the anomalous light. He was careful not to speculate. He said, "I don't know what this is, but I know it doesn't match anything I've seen in 17 years, and I thought someone should know." The tip was routed to the FBI field office in Cincinnati before noon. Special Agent Dana Reeves had been assigned to the Cincinnati Violent Crimes Against Persons Unit for 6 years. She handled missing persons cases, fugitive coordination, and interstate kidnapping referrals. She had worked 42 federal missing persons cases in that time. She had learned, through experience, that no training curriculum adequately prepares you for how to read a tip report the way a doctor reads a chart, not just for what it says, but for the shape of what it isn't saying. On the afternoon of November 14th, she pulled the initial tip report and cross-referenced the corporate booking name against federal commercial registration databases. The Delaware LLC had no employees on file, no tax filings, no prior federal contract history. It had been incorporated 11 months earlier. The registered agent was a service that incorporated hundreds of LLCs per month for clients it never met in person. That alone proved nothing. Thousands of legitimate businesses were structured the same way. What Reeves found next was different. The prepaid cards used to extend the booking had been purchased at 3 separate retail locations in 2 states, one in Cincinnati, one in Covington, Kentucky, and one in Florence, Kentucky, across a 4-week window. Each purchase had been made in cash. Each card had been activated within 24 hours of purchase and used once, for exactly the extended stay extension amount, before going dormant. 3 cards. 3 locations. 1 function. 0 reuse. That was operational security. Reeves opened a joint task force request that same afternoon, pulling in the U.S. Marshals Southern Ohio Fugitive Apprehension Strike Team, which had existing warrants infrastructure and tactical authority for the Sharonville jurisdiction. The task force also cross-referenced the booking window against the National Missing Persons Registry. 4 names came back. Vanessa Holloway, age 23, a registered ICU nurse, employed at a hospital in Columbus, Ohio. Reported missing on June 21, 2025, after she failed to return to her vehicle in the hospital employee parking structure following a night shift. Her car was found locked in its assigned spot. Her phone went dark at 11:47 p.m. The Columbus PD detective who caught the initial report had noted in his case file that the parking structure camera at the exit she would have used had been offline for maintenance since June 19th. 2 days. It had come back online June 23rd, 40 hours after she was already gone. Carrie Fontaine, age 26, from Louisville, Kentucky. Last seen leaving her own engagement dinner at a restaurant in the Highlands neighborhood on July 3rd. Her fiancé waited at the table for 40 minutes before calling her cell. Her cell went to voicemail. It has not rung since. Louisville Metro PD had canvassed a 4-block radius and interviewed everyone who had been in the restaurant that evening. No one had seen her leave. Security footage from the restaurant's exterior camera showed her walking out of frame to the right at 9:41 p.m. The camera angle covered 11 feet of sidewalk. What happened in the 12th foot was not recorded. Adriana Reyes, age 25, from Dayton, Ohio. Reported missing August 9th after she did not return to her apartment following a shift at a logistics warehouse on the north side of the city. A co-worker reported her absence. Dayton PD filed the initial report. It was upgraded to a federal cross-state referral 6 weeks later when her debit card was used once at an ATM in Cincinnati, a city she had no documented connections to. The ATM transaction was for $40. The card was never used again. The ATM camera showed a figure in a dark hooded jacket entering the PIN with their back turned to the lens. The transaction took 11 seconds. Forensics recovered a partial palm print from the ATM housing that did not match Adriana Reyes. The fourth name was Morgan Tesler, age 27, from Lexington, Kentucky. A pharmacy technician who had not reported to work since September 5th. Her landlord had called for a welfare check on September 12th. No answer. Her apartment showed no signs of forced entry, no signs of a struggle, and no indication of voluntary departure, no luggage removed, no bank account activity, no contact with family. The only thing the Lexington officers noted on the welfare check form was that a kettle on her kitchen counter was plugged in and empty, as if she had intended to make tea and simply stopped mid-preparation. 4 adults from 3 states. Missing across a 96-day window. 0 common employment, social, or geographic connections visible in initial record searches. 146 days would pass between Vanessa Holloway's disappearance and the breach of Suite 412. Put yourself in Reeves's position for a second. 4 separate open cases, 3 different jurisdictions, no physical evidence, no witnesses, no digital trail that hadn't been carefully swept. The only thing connecting them to that hotel room was a housekeeper's instinct and an amber light behind a wall where no light should have been. That was the entire foundation of the case at the end of day 1. The task force requested 12 days of covert observation before seeking entry warrants. The hotel cooperated fully and without disclosure to any other staff. Corridor cameras on the 4th floor were rerouted to a secure FBI feed. A secondary observation point was established in an unoccupied room 2 doors down from Suite 412, room 416, with 2 agents rotating 8-hour shifts. The room had been quietly cleared of its registered guest under a pretext of a plumbing issue on the floor. The guest relocated and compensated without being told the reason for the move. The observation post had a direct line of sight to the door of 412 and a secondary monitor connected to the rerouted corridor feed. For the first 4 days, nothing moved. The Do Not Disturb sign remained on the handle of Suite 412. The door did not open. No room service was requested. The in-room phone registered no outgoing calls. The agents on rotation logged the nothing in precise 15-minute intervals. Every observation report said the same thing, in the same format. No activity noted. Door secured. Sign in place. They logged it anyway, every time, because the absence of expected behavior itself becomes evidence. On day 5, a DoorDash delivery arrived for the suite, the first food delivery recorded for that room in the entire booking history. The delivery driver placed a paper bag outside the door and was gone in under 2 minutes. The door opened for approximately 8 seconds. A single hand retrieved the bag. The corridor camera captured the hand, male, right-handed, adult. The agents in 416 noted the time, 6:43 p.m. They did not move. They photographed the frame capture from the corridor feed and logged the event. The task force did not move on the delivery. They cataloged it. What the agents on observation noticed was the door. It opened inward, and in the 8 seconds it was open, the camera angle, deliberately set wide to avoid detection, did not capture the room interior. But it captured one thing: the reflection in the small convex security mirror mounted on the wall across from the suite entrance, standard in extended stay properties of this class. The reflection showed a second door. Interior. Set into the wall that the hotel blueprints showed as solid. That was the partition. The task force now had two problems. First, they did not know who was in the room, specifically whether the 4 women were there, or whether they had been moved, or whether the room held someone else entirely. Second, any premature breach would create exactly the kind of situation that endangered whoever was inside. The interior door in the reflection opened inward, which meant it could be secured from the suite side. If it was secured, the 8 seconds from corridor breach to interior entry could be 8 seconds too many. Most people assume federal kidnapping cases move straightforwardly. The law gives authority, the warrant gives entry, the team goes in. The evidence tells a different story. The 12 days of surveillance before the breach were not bureaucratic delay. They were the difference between a recovery and a casualty. On day 8 of surveillance, a subpoena was executed on the mobile carrier infrastructure serving the floor. 3 prepaid devices were active within the signal range of Suite 412 on a recurring basis. 2 showed standard usage patterns: calls, texts, social media. The third showed something different. It had pinged the same cell tower in a 7-mile radius for 41 consecutive days without registering a single outgoing call or data session. A phone on, not in use. Powered, but silent. That could mean the phone had been taken from someone who was not permitted to use it. On day 11, the task force executed a second subpoena, this time on the OBD telematics unit of a rental vehicle registered to the same Delaware LLC that held the hotel booking. The vehicle was a mid-size SUV, checked out from a rental facility at Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky International Airport on October 3rd, under a driver's license that a federal identity verification cross-check flagged as a synthetic document. The OBD data showed the vehicle had traveled to 6 locations in the greater Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky corridor over the preceding 41 days, all of them extended stay hotels or short-term rental properties. The vehicle was currently parked on level 2 of the hotel's attached parking structure. The task force verified its position through a physical drive-by, conducted in an unmarked vehicle at 11 p.m. on day 11. It had not moved in 4 days. Its parking space was visible from the stairwell exit camera. The task force added that feed to their monitoring rotation. The task force now had the pattern. A rotation. Multiple short-term properties over 5 months, ending at the Sharonville location. The Delaware LLC, the synthetic license, the prepaid cards, the partition wall, the silent phone. What they did not have was confirmation of identity. They could not confirm the 4 women were alive. They could not confirm the male in the suite was the only custodian. On day 12, November 26th, the task force leader, identified in court filings only as the supervising special agent for the joint operation, made the call to breach. The warrant file was sealed. Only 2 FBI agents and 1 U.S. Marshals fugitive team supervisor held the full operational brief. No wide dissemination. No hotel notification beyond the general manager, who was contacted at 11 p.m. and given only the instruction to ensure no staff were present on the 4th floor corridor after 3 a.m. The general manager complied without asking for details. He had been in the industry long enough to understand that some instructions are given in a register that does not invite clarification. The breach was set for 3:47 a.m. There's a detail in the task force log that struck us during our review of the case material. The kind of thing that doesn't make headlines but defines what these operations actually look like at their core. In the hours before the breach, the federal EMT assigned to the tactical team was given a single briefing document. It covered 4 potential patients. For each one, it listed only 2 things: a name and a date. The dates were the last confirmed sightings for each of the 4 women, the last time someone who knew them had seen them in person. June 21st, July 3rd, August 9th, September 5th. The EMT's job was to assess condition immediately upon recovery. The briefing document prepared them for what prolonged confinement looks like clinically. The clinical profile: potential dehydration, potential muscle atrophy from restricted movement, potential psychological dissociation from acute stress exposure, possible wounds or injuries requiring immediate stabilization. The EMT had worked mass casualty events and post-wildfire medical responses. This was different. This was 4 names and 4 dates on a single page, and the gap between those dates and the date at the top of the document, November 26th, translated directly into a set of clinical probabilities that the EMT spent the pre-breach hours quietly working through. That document sat in a sealed evidence envelope until it was entered into the federal case record in January 2026. 146 days is not an abstraction. For Vanessa Holloway, it was 146 days since she had walked through a hospital parking structure at the end of a night shift in Columbus. For Carrie Fontaine, it was 143 days since she had hugged her fiancé goodbye outside a restaurant in Louisville. For Adriana Reyes, it was 97 days since she had clocked out at a warehouse in Dayton and walked to her car in the dark. For Morgan Tesler, it was 71 days since she had filled a prescription at the pharmacy counter in Lexington and driven home through the last of the September light. All of them had families. All of them had people waiting. Vanessa's mother had not slept a full night since June 21st. She had converted the dining room of her house in Columbus into something between a command center and a shrine, printed maps with hand-drawn radius circles, a corkboard of contact names, a stack of notebooks where she had written down every detail of every conversation she had with investigators, with tip-line operators, with anyone who had called to say they thought they might have seen something. She had learned, over 146 days, how to sound calm on the phone even when she wasn't. She had learned that calm increased the chance of getting useful information. She had learned this the hard way, early on, when she hadn't been calm and the calls had grown shorter. Carrie's fiancé had kept the engagement dinner reservation as a recurring reminder in his phone calendar. He couldn't explain why, except that deleting it felt like admitting something he wasn't ready to admit. Every third of the month, the notification appeared. Every third of the month, he dismissed it without opening it. He had not been back to the restaurant. He had not moved any of her things from the space in his closet she had been gradually occupying over the 2 years before the disappearance. Her dry cleaning ticket, the one she had left on his kitchen counter July 2nd, is still there. He has not called the dry cleaner. He does not know why. It became part of the geography of waiting. Adriana's younger sister had printed 3,000 flyers and driven them to every truck stop on the I-75 corridor between Dayton and Lexington. She had organized 2 separate community searches of the area around the warehouse where Adriana had last worked. Neither search had found anything. She had started a social media page that had accumulated 47,000 followers, most strangers who had found the case through algorithm recommendation. She posted to it every single day, even on the days when there was nothing new to post, because she decided early on that the page going quiet would signal giving up. She refused to give up. She posted on her sister's birthday in October, a photograph, a memory, a sentence that ended, "Come home." Morgan's landlord, a 71-year-old retired schoolteacher who had rented to her for 3 years and treated her like a daughter, had kept the light on in the second-floor hallway of the building every night since September 12th. He had given Morgan's description to every person who came to view any vacancy in the building, on the off chance that someone, somewhere, had seen her. He had written a letter to the Lexington Herald-Leader asking them to run her photograph again. They had, twice. He read every comment under the online versions of the articles, looking for anything useful, and each time he encountered one of the comments that appears under every such article, the speculation, the armchair theorizing, the occasional cruelty of strangers online, he closed the browser and went to make tea and stood in the kitchen for a while before going back. None of them knew that on the night of November 26th, a tactical team was stacking outside a hotel room in Sharonville. None of them knew yet. But in approximately 4 hours, they would be getting a phone call. The breach team made entry at 3:47 a.m. and 22 seconds. The corridor door and the partition wall hit simultaneously. The corridor team through the primary entrance, a second element through the partition itself, using a hydraulic ram that had been specifically selected for the confined interior geometry after the task force obtained the hotel's original construction blueprints and confirmed the framing dimensions of the interior wall. The ram had been staged in the unoccupied room, adjacent to the partition's blind side, for 6 hours before the breach, positioned and pre-calibrated so that the entry team would not need to adjust it under operational conditions. The partition came down in under 4 seconds. The suspect, identified in subsequent court documents as a 34-year-old male using an alias associated with the synthetic license, was located in the front room of the suite. He was taken into custody within 90 seconds. No shots fired. No resistance involving weapons. He was handcuffed, removed to the corridor, and transferred immediately to a waiting transport vehicle. The agents in the corridor noted that he did not speak during the arrest. He looked at the floor. He was compliant in the physical sense, in the way that a person is compliant when they have already calculated that resistance serves no purpose. The 4 women were in the locked interior room. All 4 were alive. The federal EMT entered the room within 2 minutes of the breach. The clinical assessments that followed were conducted with all the efficiency that a 2-minute arrival window allows. All 4 women were transported to a hospital in the Cincinnati metropolitan area for medical assessment consistent with prolonged confinement. No further clinical details were released publicly. What was noted in the task force after-action log was that all 4 women were ambulatory. That detail, that they were able to walk under their own power out of that room, was logged without editorializing. It is the kind of detail that carries meaning the log format cannot express. Vanessa Holloway was 23 years old. She had been missing for 146 days. The suspect was taken to a federal holding facility and charged within 72 hours. The charges, filed in the Southern District of Ohio, included federal kidnapping, interstate transportation of individuals against their will, and conspiracy to commit forced labor. A federal magistrate denied bail at the initial appearance on November 29th. The denial was not contested by the defense at that stage. The suspect sat at the defense table in a beige detention uniform and showed the same flat affect the hotel staff had described on the phone, present, aware, and generating no useful information. The investigation after the Sharonville breach was not the end of the case. It was, in several important respects, the beginning of a larger one. The rental vehicle OBD data had flagged 6 prior locations. The task force served preservation orders on the guest records at each property within 48 hours of the breach. At 5 of the 6 locations, the records corroborated the pattern: the same Delaware LLC, the same prepaid card structure, the same rotation window of 21 to 28 days per location before the move. The 6th location, a short-term rental property in Covington, Kentucky, produced something different. The booking there had been made under a second LLC, incorporated in Wyoming, with a different registered agent and a different prepaid card source. The OBD data placed the rental vehicle at the Covington property on 3 occasions between mid-September and mid-October, after Tesler's disappearance and before the final relocation to Sharonville. 2 LLCs. Not 1. The investigation found what appeared to be a bifurcated administrative structure, two separate corporate shells, each used for a distinct segment of the rotation cycle, with no direct financial linkage visible in the initial forensic accounting review. Whoever had built the system had anticipated that a single corporate entity, if flagged, would expose the entire chain. The Delaware LLC handled the early phase of each rotation. The Wyoming LLC handled the transition windows, the period between properties when the risk of a pattern emerging was highest. It was a backup system, one that had been designed to absorb the failure of any single component without compromising the whole. The task force expanded its scope. A second warrant was executed on the Wyoming LLC. A third was filed for the financial institution holding the prepaid card activation records. What those records showed was a pattern of activity stretching back 22 months, predating all 4 of the Sharonville victims. The earliest transaction on the Wyoming LLC account was dated January 7, 2024. The earliest transaction on the Delaware LLC was March 15, 2024. There had been other victims. The task force did not yet know how many. Here's the take that will probably get us pushback, but we'll say it plainly. The system that allowed those 2 LLCs to be incorporated, funded through untraceable prepaid instruments, and used to book commercial lodging across 6 states, without triggering a single automatic flag in 11 months of operation, did not fail by accident. It failed because the institutional mechanisms that were supposed to catch this kind of layered anonymization were either underfunded, understaffed, or designed for a threat profile that predated the current prepaid card and anonymous LLC landscape. 4 women spent between 71 and 146 days in a locked room, in part because administrative infrastructure didn't move as fast as the people exploiting it. That's not a comment on the agents who ran the Sharonville operation. The housekeeper noticed the light on November 12th, and the task force had a breach warrant in 12 days. That is fast. That is the system working. The failure was upstream, and it was structural. The question worth sitting with is this: how many operations like this one ran the full rotation cycle without a Maria Delgado on the 4th floor? The financial forensics on the 2 LLCs took 11 weeks. The full accounting review was not complete until February 3, 2026. By that point, the case had moved from a single location kidnapping to a multi-state federal conspiracy investigation involving at least 2 additional unidentified subjects. On December 4, 2025, 8 days after the Sharonville breach, the financial forensic team reviewing the Delaware LLC's prepaid card history flagged an outgoing transfer that did not fit the lodging and supplies pattern. A single payment of $412 to a commercial mail forwarding service in Memphis, Tennessee, made on October 22nd. The payment was made from a prepaid card that had not been used for any other transaction. The Memphis address was a mail forwarding service that accepted deliveries for commercial clients. The specific box associated with the payment had received 3 packages over the preceding 14 months, all sent via ground carrier, all listed as commercial samples, all originating from addresses in different states. The task force subpoenaed the mail forwarding service on December 11th. The box had been cleared of its last delivery on November 21st, 5 days before the Sharonville breach. Someone had known to clear it. That obstacle stopped the investigative expansion cold for 6 weeks. The financial trail went to a box that had been cleaned out. The packages, their contents, their full origin chain, their recipients, were gone. The mail forwarding service retained no records of the contents beyond the carrier waybill descriptions, which listed all 3 packages as containing commercial product samples, a description generic enough to pass through any automated screening system without generating a flag. The task force did not abandon the lead. They filed a secondary subpoena on the carrier company's internal tracking system, requesting GPS and handling data for all packages associated with the box across a 20-month window. Carriers do not advertise that this data exists. It exists. The tracking data came back on January 19, 2026. It showed all 3 packages had been collected at the Memphis facility by the same vehicle, a commercial cargo van registered to a third-party logistics company based in Nashville, Tennessee. The last collection had occurred on November 21st at 2:44 p.m., 4 hours before the close of business. Whoever had sent the instruction to clear the box had done so with enough lead time to be methodical about it. The Nashville Logistics Company was incorporated in Nevada. It had 1 employee on file. Its registered business address was a storage unit facility in Murfreesboro. The investigation had found a second node. Would you have caught that thread? A $400 mail payment buried in 2 years of prepaid card transactions? It was the kind of detail that disappears in a routine review. The analyst who flagged it was not assigned to the financial forensics team. She was a contract data reviewer, processing overflow documents during the December holiday staffing window, working on a batch of records that were supposed to be secondary priority. She ran a keyword filter for non-lodging payments over $300, and the Memphis entry came back on the first pass. She flagged it, wrote a 2-sentence note in the review log, and moved on to the next batch. She did not know, in that moment, what she had found. She was doing her job the way it is supposed to be done, not with inspiration, but with method. Her name does not appear in any public court document. It probably never will. The Nashville expansion warranted a second federal grand jury referral, which was filed under seal in the Middle District of Tennessee on February 10, 2026. The sealed referral remained active at the time this reconstruction was prepared. The full scope of that investigation, the number of individuals involved, the geographic extent of the network, and whether additional victims existed prior to the 4 recovered in Sharonville, had not been disclosed publicly. The man arrested in Suite 412 entered a federal detention facility in southern Ohio on November 29th and remained held without bail pending trial. His first court appearance produced no substantive disclosures. His defense team filed a motion to suppress the corridor camera evidence on Fourth Amendment grounds. That motion was denied by the district court on January 28, 2026. A second suppression motion, targeting the OBD telematics data obtained through subpoena on the rental vehicle, was filed in February and remained pending at the time this reconstruction was prepared. A second suspect connected to the Nashville logistics node was identified through the carrier tracking data in late January. As of the date this reconstruction was prepared, that individual had not been apprehended. A federal arrest warrant had been issued. The warrant was active. The 4 women recovered from Suite 412 were discharged from the Cincinnati hospital between 48 and 72 hours after the breach, following medical assessment. Their formal interviews with federal investigators were conducted over the subsequent 2 weeks, in sessions structured to allow for breaks and to accommodate the clinical guidance of trauma specialists who had been brought into the case by the FBI's Victim Services Unit. The content of those interviews was placed under seal as part of the criminal case file. Vanessa Holloway, the ICU nurse from Columbus who had been missing since June 21st, went back to Ohio. Her mother, who had not slept a full night in 146 days, was notified by phone at approximately 5:30 a.m. on November 27, 2025, about 90 minutes after the breach team had cleared the room and confirmed all 4 women were alive. That call was made by a federal victim services coordinator, following standard FBI notification protocol. What the protocol does not cover, and what no procedure can formalize, is the 4 or 5 seconds between when the phone rings at 5:30 a.m. and when the person on the other end hears the first word. The period where a mother who has been waiting 146 days does not yet know which direction the call is going. A ringing phone at 5:30 in the morning carries both possibilities simultaneously, until the moment it doesn't. The protocol is designed for what comes after that moment. Nothing is designed for the moment itself. That interval, those few seconds, is what the entire operational structure described in this reconstruction existed to reach. 12 days of surveillance. 2 subpoenas. A rental car OBD unit. A sealed warrant. A 6-person tactical team moving down a silent corridor at 3:47 a.m. A hydraulic ram pre-staged in a darkened room. A contract data reviewer running a keyword filter on a secondary priority document batch during a holiday staffing window. The work traces back, through all of it, to a woman named Maria Delgado, pressing her pass card briefly against a hotel doorframe at 3:15 in the morning, and noticing that the light she saw made no sense. One detail. One call. The second suspect connected to the Nashville expansion remains at large as of July 26, 2026. The sealed grand jury referral in the Middle District of Tennessee has not been resolved. The full chain connecting the two LLCs, the logistics node, and whatever preceded the earliest known transaction in January of 2024 has not been disclosed in any public court document. The 4 women from Sharonville are alive. The network that held them for 146 days is not fully mapped. The demand that built it has